You heard about the trend in gray divorce? Gray divorce is when people are 50, 60, and 70 and beyond, suddenly deciding not to stick it out, suddenly deciding it's time to break this marriage up. That's a gray divorce. And today we're going to be speaking with Susan Guthrie. Susan Guthrie is a leading expert, a lawyer, and an advocate for people going through all kinds of divorce situations. She was my divorce attorney, I don't know, 25 years ago. And we go way back. But here's the thing that makes her the expert on gray divorce. I mean, she was already, or she wouldn't have been picked for this particular wonderful experience. She was just on Oprah talking about gray divorces. How cool is that? And so I want to bring her expertise to you so that you can better understand what the heck this means and how to go about the journey that you might be taking, or someone that you love, like your mother and father, are going through, and you're going, why now, mom? I get a lot of that coming into my room here, and it's a very confusing thing for the entire family. In my case of narcissistic abuse divorces, I'm not saying necessarily that the person is a narcissist, but it is becoming more common where the person is blindsided, completely blindsided. And maybe it's I need to go get a red Porsche and, live out my life the way I want to kind of a thing. But they're being dumped. They're being abandoned. And so gray divorce is serious and it affects so many things. So let's go meet Susan, and we're going to talk about what you can do if you are faced with this, or someone you know or love is. This is Tracy Malone. I am the author of Divorcing Your Narcissist. You can't make this shit up. And let's go meet Susan now. Welcome, Susan. I'm so excited that you are here today.
Oh, Tracy, I always love joining you and your audience.
Well, we have known each other for a very long time, and you have been doing amazing things. And the reason we're talking about gray divorce, not only that it is big and epically growing, because you were on Oprah Winfrey.
Yes, yes. When Oprah reaches out and says, would you like to come on and talk about gray divorce? You say yes.
Yes, absolutely. There's no question about it, but you're the only person I know that's been on it. So it's like meeting a celebrity, I have
Ah,
to say.
just a very lucky person. That's me.
Exactly. That's like
Yep.
everyone's dream. And you made that dream come true with this gray divorce topic. And it is rising. Or is it the awareness of it? What do you think?
Good question, because I think it is both, to be honest. I know, I've been at this for 35 years, right? So I will tell you, 35 years ago, you really didn't see later marriages later in life or long-term marriages 20 and 30 years. You didn't see those going to divorce. But I will say I did start to see a rise in it probably 20 years ago. I remember still very distinctly my very first, what I would now know is a gray divorce, was a couple who'd been married for 42 years. And I remember being gobsmacked, like, oh my God, I've never had a couple that's been married that long. And that was a training ground for now what's much more common, because there are a lot of the same issues, but they're amplified when the marriage is a longer term marriage and people are closer, to retirement or just later in life. But so I think it has been around, but with things like social media, with things like the Oprah podcast, or, people talking about it, I do think that's elevated the awareness. And with awareness comes maybe more people going, oh, I can do that. Right. So that may also be spurring it. It's like the phenomena that we see that's very real, that in friend groups, when one couple gets divorced, it kind of sets off a domino effect of other couples in the group getting divorced. I
Mhm.
think the awareness of gray divorce is making people who are a little later in life and their relationship isn't where they want it say, hmm, hmm,
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
right?
And yet, I mean, it's a really hard time for
Oh,
people who, the people that I work with who are going through this 50s, 60s, 70s, um, it wasn't what they planned for.
no.
It wasn't like retirement. If you're 70 or 60, you're on the cusp of retiring, and now we're splitting our income, or, that was the breadwinner, and now all of a sudden we're gonna have to, the money's more limited when you're retired, and it gets really, really sticky and very, very scary for my clients.
Yeah, I mean, divorce is a scary event in people's lives anyway, with all the uncertainty and all that, but you're spot on with that because you have now decades usually of how a relationship has unfolded. So you mentioned someone who's a breadwinner. Very common with longer term marriages, right? We had that more traditional paradigm. So a lot of the people going through gray divorce today haven't worked in decades if they were a stay-at-home parent. And you mentioned retirement. Not only are you now going to split the income and or split those retirement assets, you don't have any or much time to recoup, right? They're just getting divided and that's all that you had. And I was just mentioning my husband and I have been, thinking about, hey, suddenly we better start paying attention to retirement. It's a little bit down the road, but not as far as we thought. And so you people plan for retirement. They put funds aside and they think they're settled.
Mhm.
And then divorce happens and suddenly they have half the assets that they thought they'd have. And we all know, right? It costs less to support two people in one household in retirement than two households in retirement on half the money.
Absolutely. I had one client that celebrated her 50th
Oh,
anniversary while getting a divorce.
oh no.
So,
Yeah.
blindsided, restarting, just rebuilding. And again, as you said, half the money that you expected. When you have been married 50 years, that means you're at least 70 probably. And you are like, now what? And even the concept of getting a divorce when you're younger, someone might get the house and then they get less money. But as you said, then they can build wealth for retirement and they
Right.
stay
They
in
have a
the,
runway to get back to financial health.
yeah, and they could stay in that house and it's enough, right? But when you're older, you might not be able to maintain that house any longer if the money gets divvied up. And, if you just get the house, then do you not get any retirement? I mean, that's the different game that it feels like to people in this situation. The decisions are harder and they're more costly in the mistake. If you chose that, oh, now I have a house, but I don't have any money to live on, and I've got to start working at 70.
Well, and such a good point. And it's further complicated by the economic situation that we are in right now. So, those who are going through divorce right now, and this is true for anyone who's going through a divorce, whether
Mhm.
it's a 1 year marriage or the 50-year marriage, getting divorced in 2026 right now, with the way the economy is in the US, at least, is a very complicated thing, more complicated than we've seen for many years
Mhm.
because things like health insurance is much more expensive. But if you're in gray divorce, Medicare and Medicaid are being impacted by some of the tax consequences of things that have happened. That has a significant impact on your retirement post divorce life. Housing costs, right? So you mentioned you may not be able to afford to keep the house without getting some retirement, but can you afford to buy another house? No, probably not because mortgage rates, interest rates are through the roof. Rentals are harder and harder to find and are that much more expensive because of that. Where are you going to go live? Right there, so there's so much more to it just than the dividing of the assets. It's your runway to amass more, wealth. You are being very deeply negatively impacted by the world in which you find yourself as an economic factor in all of this. So your options are even more limited when you're getting divorced right now, especially in that gray divorce situation.
Absolutely. And I think the emotions, the fear is like off the chart. I mean, anyone getting a divorce, as you said, the fear of the unknown, the uncertainty, the what ifs, what will I do, and all of those things are devastating for anyone. But when you are 65, 70 years old, as you said, where are you going to live? I pay more now in rent than I did to have a house 6 times bigger than this, and it's like, now what do you do? And I don't need a house 6 times bigger, but to pay for a rental more than you have paid for your mortgage for 30 years is shocking to people. And it's very limited as to where people can go because everywhere is growing and growing in expense. And I see a lot of people ending up back in their ch adult children's homes. Do you see that?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that was a theme on the Oprah podcast. So Oprah had people in the audience who were sharing some of the impacts of gray divorce on their lives. I remember distinctly one young gentleman who had quit his job on the West Coast, was moving back to the East Coast because his mother, who was getting divorced, was going to come live with him. So his entire, as an adult child of divorce, his entire life was being uprooted. He did that out of love and care for his mother, who had supported him. And they were, putting very distinct boundaries around that. But you talk about the fear, there's also so many other emotions that come into this, right? That come into play. So here's a mother who's now relying on her adult child. So that was causing, some emotional content for both of them and worry. There's the emotional aspect of you have identified as someone's spouse, as part of a couple for decades, as
Mhm.
a member of a family unit for decades, as grandma and grandpa, or whatever those things might be, for however long that is, or you're going to be grandma and grandpa in a very different construct than you ever saw it. And so take fear and add on grief and, all of these other things that get put on top of that, and it can be really overwhelming for people, to the point where, another one of the guests, I remember her saying, for a year it was really hard to just get out of bed.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because they're not only losing the house, what you were just saying is the identity of our family. Christmases, we're always at mom and dad's house. Now what are we going to do? All of these things become parts of the puzzle that everyone has to shuffle to try to put back together, like that son moving across the country. A lot of parents aren't getting that. And so they're in this place of what am I going to do? But they're losing their identity, as you said. This kind of stuff to me and my people, they have shame.
Oh,
Look,
sure.
I'm a failure after 50 years, 45 years. It's not that you are a failure, but that's your identity, and it's now been smashed. So therefore, you feel bad. And then, like the son who's taking care of his mom, now you feel guilt. Oh my God,
Hmm.
I really thought I could take care of myself. I did everything right to make sure that I wouldn't be ever a burden to my children. And now I have to do this, and it's dividing families, and it's becoming such a problem that it's not just the parents. It really
Oh no.
involves the whole family, even if you're not like seeing them every weekend. It's the grandchildren. It's the birthday parties for the grandchildren. Will both grandparents come? I mean, it's the same as normal divorce, but now you've got this layer of many, many, many years that it's always been this way. And now what are we going to do? Is dad not going to be invited? Are they going to have to split up and go one holiday Christmas Eve with mom and Christmas Day with dad? Because they also have other in-laws and they have their own family,
Right.
right?
I was going to say, and you're talking about 40-year-old adult children right now. So it's a different, right? This is a different construct than where your 10-year-old and your 12-year-old are going to go for the holidays.
Mhm.
Yeah, that adult child aspect of all this is actually, I think, one of the missing things that people don't really understand. I just did an episode with Carol Hughes on Divorce and Beyond. She wrote a book called Home Will Never Be the Same. And she and Bruce, her co-author, had been on back in 2021, but she came back because Gray Divorce is even getting bigger, and there was a huge response to it because you're talking about that situation with your adult children. They get pulled into this in ways that children don't, right? Like we all know from professionals to most parents going through divorce, you don't or you try not to involve your 10-year-old and your 12-year-old in the divorce,
Yeah.
right? Hopefully we can all be the grown-ups and not do that, although we all know it gets done all the time. But people don't have the same filter when it comes to their 30-year-old, their 40-year-old. And they drag them right into it. And they talk about all the things that dad did and all the things that mom did. And they rely on that adult child. So that adult child now is going through an identity crisis as well. That's not being seen, perhaps, or is being seen, and it then exacerbates the guilt you were just talking about. So the cycle, I always say, divorce is difficult 1 year, 50 years. But when it is in seen through the gray lens, everything is amplified. Everything is 10x
Mhm.
because of all of these factors. Yet most people are not prepared for it, nor because they've been in a relationship for decades, are they ready to deal with all of this coming at them. They're even less prepared. They're usually of a generation older.
Mhm.
You mentioned shame. The older the generation, the more shame people feel because the more shame that generation places on this construct,
Mhm.
right? You're not going to get millennials or Gen Z looking at divorce with the same hairy eyeball that you are going to get from boomers,
Yeah.
right? Or even, well, I like to think we Gen Xers are a little more tolerant as well, but right, but still, you have all of that brought into the mix.
Absolutely. And again, when it's leaving the home that you've been in and the neighborhood and your friends and everything that you knew. Now, you can still go visit your friends, but it's
Mhm.
not the same as meeting them at the mailbox and having a casual chat, right? It's taking away your support system. It's taking away everything that you knew before. And when I think about the narcissistic factor, because again, the clients that I'm working with are coming in with I think they might be a narcissist kind of rubber stamp, right?
Don't we
But
wish that stamp was on their forehead so
I
we
know, and
knew?
it should be like, tattooed, right? But at the same time, I think if you think about someone enduring for 30, 40 years, someone's constant abuse and belittling and just not really being there. They put it in and now like they're just gonna stick it out. And it's for me in 90% of my clients, blindsided.
Hmm.
Wait, I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who kept on supporting you and helping you and took this crazy kind of treatment. And now it just backfires. And every narcissistic tactic used by a 20-year-old is now getting pulled out against a 70-year-old who doesn't understand. Why are you hiding money? It's ours. Let's just split it. Why do we have to have a $7 million divorce? I have one client 12 years later now, $7 million. Why do we have to go through that? Why can't we just be nice, right? It's still that battle was nothing that they were prepared for. The divorce is already bing, total shock. But when you get into a situation where now the devil spawn is doing everything to destroy you, people are not prepared for that.
Well, in fact, they've been conditioned, right, to expect or not expect it, but when you have been for decades in a narcissistic abuse relationship, where you have been just repetitively abused, we all know you don't see how far down you've gotten in that paradigm, right? You don't see the coping mechanisms that you have created over years to learn how to survive that. And, we all know, right, that this abuse only amplifies when there's the split. Even if
Mhm.
you're not the one who wants to split, even if they're the one who brought it up, when you try to take their stuff, watch out, right? All hell's going to break loose and you're going to get the post separation abuse and it's going to ramp up. And so, but you have been for 30, 40 years in a relationship where you have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. You've gotten smaller for 2 years, you've gotten smaller for 10 years. That's one thing. Definitely, you have things you have to deal with, and it's going to be hard. But you've got 40 years. You are this, you are tiny in that relationship. Your skill set, your power, the power imbalance is so vast.
So vast.
That's why they need someone like you. Thank God you're doing the work that you do. It doesn't surprise me to hear that a lot of your clients are in the gray divorce situation because everyone needs help going through it. I always say, wouldn't work, wouldn't make, when I was practicing, I would not get involved in a case where we had narcissistic behaviors unless the person who was being abused had a coach,
Mhm.
right? I just didn't, there's no way they have to have one.
Yeah.
But for someone who's going through a gray divorce with that huge disparity in power,
Mhm.
it's a life and death sort of thing. That may be a little over the top, but not really.
Well, I do think it's life and death
Yeah.
because the tactics that a narcissist uses in divorce are, over the top and
Yeah.
unexpected by that gray divorce situation. And they're blindsided every day by the tactics. And how could they do this, right? And then they go into a spiral of shame and they're also grieving. They are
Yeah.
also grieving
Yeah.
everything about their life. And so now they have to deal with these tactics that are being thrust at them, just like every other narcissistic divorce, at rapid pace, and they don't know what to do, and they freeze. And guess what happens when they freeze? They give in and they lose their future.
Yes.
Like that's the problem that I see. And it's
Oh,
like, okay, I just want it to end. I don't want to fight a big battle. Okay, but like, let's try to get what you want. Let's make sure you're not just handing everything to them because you are 60 or 70 and there's no
and you have no
change.
runway.
You have no runway. You have to move on. And if you give them all they want just to make them go away, you're the one going to take and pay the price. I know that for me, I was divorced twice and
Yeah.
I was divorced a long time ago, but I have lost everything. And I'm
Yeah.
65. I'm not in a home. I'm not losing those things at this point, but I did. And I will never be able to retire because of my divorce. I don't want anyone else to be in that situation where they're hopeless and they're going to work at Walmart because they've never worked before. That's not the life that people who have been in this environment of a healthy family and a house and the securities that you have at that age, to have it all ripped out from you and be abused in the process and not even have the tools to go, oh, I see what they're doing. I'm not going to lose sleep over that. I'll tell my lawyer this. We'll get through it this way instead of the panic and all of the anxiety that goes with this.
Yeah. There's divorce, which is one level of difficulty. Then there's gray divorce, which is the next level. As I said, everything's amplified. Put narcissistic behaviors on top of that,
Mhm.
and you are really at the bottom rung of hell. I mean, and to add another thing to it, and I'm sure you see this as well, when people have stayed in that difficult relationship for decades and then are getting divorced later in life, there's also a factor of why did I stay?
Mhm.
I should, I did this to myself. I knew I should have gone, but I was sticking. I thought once I got to this point of 40 years or whatever it was, I'd made it to where we were just going to, get through to the end where one of us dropped dead. So there's a guilt factor, but it's the did I stay? Why did I do this to myself as well? And they got caught up in that without understanding the complex emotional construct of being abused. And so that adds another layer to it that often I think leads to the freeze that you're talking about. We know there's fight, flight, or freeze.
Hmm.
The freeze is, I think, brought on in many cases in these situations because it's compounded by, I did this to myself.
The self-blame and the,
Yeah.
the why did I do this? And I'd known this person wasn't safe for all these years, but we've been married for 40 years, blah, 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 and you go through all of that, but now you're in this really dangerous and very, very scary time. I was just thinking of something when you were talking that occurred to me. One of the securities in a long-term relationship like that is often life insurance. Like,
Hmm.
hey, if my other person dies, that's our fallback, right? And that gives some kind of security. How does that kind of get equalized out, or what happens with that in a gray divorce?
Well, it's complicated, right? Because yes, life insurance is a really critical factor. It's critical when you're younger in your divorce because it's there to secure maybe alimony or child support for a period of time, right? Very important. Here's the key thing. When you're younger, it's easy to get and it's
Mhm.
cheap, right? So when you are older in life, very often, if people have done retirement planning or estate planning, life insurance is a part of that. Well, most people do their life and their estate planning while they're still maybe 40s, maybe 50s, they start doing it. Still easier to get life insurance at that point in time and cheaper, but it's not forever,
Mhm.
right? Life insurance is usually 10, 20-year term, depending on what you get. So if you're 50, when your spouse gets that life insurance that's going to help you during your retirement years, if
Mhm.
something happens to them, and
Mhm.
now you're getting divorced like your client at 70, that policy's gone.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
policy expired. And at 70, that spouse can't go out and get a reasonably priced policy. So that's the problem. If there are 5 years left, 10 years left for people who are later in life, you might be able to get the court or make as a part of your agreement that they will maintain that policy. Or if they won't, and you can't get that, you get an order that you can maintain it. Get
Mhm.
the $500,000 of coverage over them. But the problem that's really devastating is you can't get life insurance on people the older they get, or if they have pre-existing conditions, which happens more as we get older.
Mhm.
So that becomes, it's such an important tool in estate planning,
Mhm.
and it's almost wiped out in gray divorce.
And that's again another financial fear. We always had that cushion.
Yeah.
And now it's going to be something that's gone. When I got my divorce, my husband was, I don't know, 45,
Yeah.
and he had life insurance, and I was allowed to keep paying it. And I paid it for about 5 years, wishing he would die. And he didn't. And I'm like, this is stupid. I should be using that money for my own retirement. And I stopped. But when you're in a gray divorce, if you are the one that's going to pay for it, like you just said, oh, ask the court and you can keep on paying it. That's another bill that you didn't expect. And now you're going and getting new housing and you're going to pick up that. Yes, it is a security that is worth it. Again, if they die.
Well, it depends, right? That's why you need a financial advisor at that point. One thing I'll say about a gray divorce, you should have a financial advisor helping you
Mhm.
because your brain, especially if you are not a financial advisor, but even if you are, you're this is complicated stuff. I mean, we're scratching at the surface, right? What there's differences like when a retirement plan for older people has gone into pay status. So if
Mhm.
someone is retired and say one of them is already getting their pension or they've started drawing down, how you can divide that asset is vastly impacted. Some pensions are not divisible once they're in pay status. So now how do you get the money that you thought you'd be living on off your spouse's pension? Complicated stuff. You have to have an advisor.
That's a brilliant idea. And the people again don't understand that. So I'm so glad you said that
Oh.
in this conversation because, you know, Divorce is not something they are aware of, and they're going to be limited money. Like, what do you mean now I have to get a financial advisor? If you want more money, if you want it to be fair, you need someone else. And lawyers are not the financial person. They can execute what you ask for and what the financial person tells you, but they're not going to sit there and go, oh, this means that and that means this.
And you don't want to pay them to do that, by the way. At $600 an hour or 300, whatever your attorney is, you
Yeah.
don't want them doing financial modeling. A financial professional will be much less expensive than that. You want a certified divorce financial analyst, CDFA. And I tell this to people all the time, just as I tell them having a divorce coach, having a coach who's going to help them deal with the emotional stuff. You have to have that advisor who's going to give you real, straight advice on the finances, especially for your clients, Tracy, the ones who are in the freeze.
Right.
Because if they're making decisions without having someone give them the blunt truth about their post divorce finances, they will be negatively impacted. And so the money you spend on that financial advisor comes back to you manyfold in the fact that you will have, it won't be perfect because they can't wave a magic wand and make the financial difficulties of gray divorce go away,
Mhm.
but they can help you make the best of it.
Yes, yes. And you think about the people who again have not been doing the finances and oh, the idea of having the house makes me feel better, but could you afford it? That's what these financial people are looking at and going, this would work, this won't work. This is what you'll be left with if you don't do that due diligence. You are going to think you can afford it, but then that pension's gone and that security's gone, and it's a different ball game. So I am so grateful that we have had this conversation today. Is there anything that you want to close with and that we forgot to talk about?
Just for people who are going through gray divorce who feel like this is the worst thing that has ever happened to them. I would direct them to watch the Oprah podcast, the episode that we've been talking about, because there were five people in the audience talking about their experience of gray divorce. And they were very, open and honest about how difficult it was. I think that's important to hear.
Mhm.
But every one of them, except the woman who had just filed a week before the show was air or was taped, but the other four all said that they came out on the other side freer, better, ready for their new life. In fact, I had Mary Jane Sweet, who was on the show with her adult daughter, who
Mhm.
was just spectacular. And she came on Divorce and Beyond, and we talked about it. And she is so happy in her post gray divorce life, happier, she said, than she has been in her life. And her daughters are as well. She has two absolutely delightful daughters who admire their mother's strength after watching the experience she went through and how she managed it. So know that there's hope on the other side. It is hard. We've had a lot of gloom and doom, perhaps, in this conversation. But just as most clients over my 30 plus years of practice have said to me, divorce was a gift in the end,
Mhm.
the gray divorce people, almost it's a bigger gift because after decades in a relationship that's not serving,
Mhm.
you get for the time you have
Yeah.
to have that better life.
And I love helping them figure out who they were and who they want to be. Because again, losing that identity, it's like you're just a floating soul and you just like, how do I find it again? And getting that back, it's like an aha moment that just gives me such joy for people to just go, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
When their identity is tied into that relationship, it's not who you are, it's who you were. So let's figure out who you want to be. So, how do people find you? One last thing, go ahead.
Best way is the Divorce and Beyond podcast. Sorry, the podcast website is divorceandbeyondpod.com. We have all kinds of free assets or free resources for people there. You can search through the database of 450 episodes. You can find all of Tracy's. Just put her name in the search bar. It'll bring up all of her top 10 episodes on the podcast ever. I think you have number 2 and you have number 5. I mean, really some of the top episodes. But all kinds of resources and things there for people. A lot of episodes on Grey Divorce, especially lately. So I highly recommend divorceandbeyondpod.com.
Thank you. We'll put the links down below. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been exactly what my clients need.
Well, I always love joining you. As I said when we got started earlier today, when you call, the answer is always yes. So happy to be here.
Thank you, my friend. Hope that helps you get your head around the consequences of a great divorce, the what ifs, what could happen, minefields to watch out for, the emotional toll. I am here to help you. I am here to guide you if you are dealing with this because it's not going to be easy. And I also have my book, Divorcing Your Narcissist. You can't make this shit up. And it's true. The things that you are about to see are going to make your head spin. Can be exorcist spin. Like, what is happening here? But you're not alone. I am here. You could find information about me, Tracy Malone. Put my name into a Google search, you will find it. But my website is narcissistabusesupport.com. And again, we don't have to diagnose them to know that there's crazy coming. All right. And I will see you on the other side. Thank you.